Hey guys, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to my guide for Turn 8 of the Binding Coil of Bahamut, aka the second Coil of Bahamut, Turn 3. In this guide, we will go over the mechanics present in this turn, including a quick rundown on trash, as well as all of the mechanics of the boss. Quickly, let's go over the trash area of this turn. There will be several jumping platforms to help you get around to the different levels of the area, similar to the ones you encountered in Turn 3. Additionally, several elegant defense systems will be patrolling the area. When one finds you, it will use a weak version of high voltage, this won't paralyze you, before summoning several enemies to fight you. Stop, kill these enemies, and then move on. Your ultimate goal of this section is to reach the bulkhead at the front of the middle level. The easiest way to do this is to simply run all the way down the first hallway you start in, jump up a level, and then you'll be right there. When you get there, there will be two trash mobs waiting. Just kill them quickly and then have somebody trigger the bulkhead after they die. If any wandering ADS nodes aggro you and spawn more enemies, just deal with them real quick before heading into the boss room. You are now up against the Turn 8 boss, the Avatar. The Avatar is a strange fight to make a guide for. While this is our preferred method in the way that we won, the fight is designed in such a way that multiple strategies could work, so I may actually end up making more guides on this in the future for different ways to approach the fight. We'll see. So anyway, I'll explain each individual mechanic of the boss first, before discussing why our group does things in a certain way. Additionally, at the end of the video will be a link to a kill from my perspective with commentary to help clarify anything and see the fight from start to finish. The first and most important thing is the enrage timer. The Avatar has an 11-minute enrage timer. After 11 minutes, he will automatically cast Atomic Ray and wipe the raid. This isn't the turn to enrage. This thing will kill you. Second, the Avatar is rooted in the center of the room, so no matter where you move, he will remain there. The Avatar himself has several attacks that will remain throughout the entire fight. For his basic attacks, he will just hit you physically if you're in melee range, but if you move out of melee range, it will cause him to hurl very hard-hitting lasers at the tank. So if the tank needs to move away for any reason, healers need to be ready. He also has a giant conal AoE, which is basically his cleave attack. This does several thousand damage and places a debuff on whoever it hits that deals about 600 damage every 3 seconds. This should be Asuna'd or leeched ASAP off the main tank, who should be the only person getting hit by this at any point in the fight. The Avatar also has 2 artillery attacks, Homing Missile and Gaseous Bomb. Homing Missile will create a tether between the Avatar and a random player other than the main tank. This tether can be transferred to another player by having them walk into it. After a short time, the Avatar will fire a homing missile at the target, dealing a few thousand AoE damage. It's best to have a DPS such as a Bard or maybe a Monk or Dragoon run these homing missiles out of the group. The other attack, Gaseous Bomb, will place a satellite laser looking marker above someone's head. After a short time, the bomb will hit them, dealing a few thousand damage that can be split amongst every target hit. So just stack up for this attack and you should be fine. With these 4 mechanics out of the way, let's talk about the single most important mechanic of the fight, the bio towers. At each cardinal direction of the room, there is a single bio tower. These towers will spawn at predetermined times and patterns throughout the entire fight, and each has their own mechanics, as well as a few combined mechanics. When a set of towers rise, it will rise in groups of 2 or 3. Each tower will start with a single charge similar to the King Behemoth towers in the Crystal Tower. Every 15 seconds, a single charge will be added to the tower. If 2 towers charge up at the same time at the same frequency, the boss will gain 2 stacking buffs. One of them will decrease his damage taken, and the other will increase his damage dealt. If 2 or more towers charge to full at the same time, he will cast Atomic Ray and instantly wipe the party. Additionally, if a player steps into a tower, they will instantly add a stack to the charge and get the debuff Languishing, which will make them take a lot more damage if they try to increase the charge on a tower again while they have the debuff. Upon charging a tower, you will also take moderate damage in the form of Life Drain, about 1200 to 1500 damage without any Languishing stacks. Any Languishing stacks will greatly multiply this number. You must organize who will be adding stacks to towers in order to prevent the boss from gaining damage stacks, and to prevent Atomic Ray. That's not all for the towers, however. Each tower also has a mechanic that will be executed upon it becoming fully charged. The west and south towers will execute defensive maneuver, which does several thousand unavoidable raid-wide damage. The north tower summons a clockwork dreadnought, which must be tanked and killed. It has a conal swipe attack, and if it's not killed fast enough, will enrage and start instantly killing players. The east tower summons 3 landmines in random spots of the arena. These landmines will do about 2,000 AoE damage and knock any in-range players away after someone steps on them, but moving away from them will prevent the damage since you won't be in the AoE range. If all 3 of them are not triggered before 15 seconds are up, they will explode and do 15,000 damage to the entire raid, wiping you. The balancing act of this fight is deciding when it is optimal to send players to push towers faster and when to leave them alone. There are trade-offs to every different strategy, and it becomes about what makes your group the most comfortable. Getting the towers to time up well with the avatar's other abilities is crucial. So now that we've covered what each tower and basic ability of the avatar does, let's talk about the fight itself and how it plays out. Phase 1 starts at 100% and will continue on until 2 minutes and 40 seconds have passed. There may also be an HP percentage threshold that can cause this phase to happen sooner. In this phase, you will encounter 2 different sets of bio towers. The first will be a Dreadnought Tower and the West Defensive Maneuver Tower. We prefer to send 2 players to speed up the Dreadnought Tower significantly, spawn it, kill it, and then prepare for defensive maneuver. For the Dreadnought, we use a single tank in order to help with the DPS requirement for this fight. As a warrior, he provokes the mob, tags it with 2 tomahawks, then combos it, and we kill it fast. He runs every single one of his defensive cooldowns, since by the time the next Dreadnought spawns, all of them will be available again. It's a lot of damage for a single person to be taking, so all healers should be focusing on him. Paladins can likely do the same thing with Shield Lob, Flash, and Rage of Halone as long as they have the cross-class ability Provoke, which, let's be honest, they should have by this point in the game. Keep in mind that 2 tanking this fight is very possible to do if you have good DPS and your healers are also DPSing as well. With more gear, it will become even easier to either single tank or dual tank this fight. If 2 tanking it, the off tank can tank it where it spawns for now and have the DPS kill it that way, though dragging it closer to the boss should increase DPS uptime since the DPS shouldn't really have to move all that much. The next set of towers will be landmines plus defensive maneuver. We send 2 different players, since languishing is still on the first 2, into the landmine tower to spawn it quickly. In order to handle landmines, we assign 3 DPS to a quadrant of the arena. They each had their own, and then the main tank took up the remaining quadrant. They would all go for their individual landmines. If multiple landmines spawned in a quadrant, they would quickly claim one of them for themselves and pop them in a safe manner as to not kill the other DPS. Bit of quick judgment will be required for things like this. You can set up contingency plans, but only so much can be planned for this fight. After this, the defensive maneuver tower should explode and it will be time for Phase 2. Phase 2 begins at about 2 minutes and 40 seconds into the fight and continues until about 7 minutes into the encounter, or 35% of the boss's HP. In this phase, the Avatar himself will have 2 new mechanics on top of Homing Missile and Gaseous Bomb, which, by the way, you are going to be dealing with the whole fight, so I left it out of the Phase 1 part. Just be expecting to deal with it the entire fight. The first is Brain Jack, which will confuse the main tank and cause him to attack the nearest ally. To counter this, we place someone so close into the Avatar's hitbox that the tank attacks them, but can still tank the boss facing away from the group. This is so you can prevent needing to do tank swaps for Brain Jack. Here's a close-up screenshot of what it should look like when you are the Brain Jack off tank. He will do Brain Jack every 30 seconds in this phase. Additionally, he will begin marking 2 targets other than the main tank with Ballistic Missile. When he does this, he will bind them in place and begin to channel the spell. Each person bound will either be surrounded by a small circle or a large one. The size of the circle changes how you counter the attack. A small circle indicates that 2 players must be standing inside of it to prevent it from instantly killing the bound player. A large circle indicates that it will require 3 players for the same mechanic. Now, this count does include the bound player, so a small circle only requires 1 extra person, and the large requires 2 extra people. Any extra or any less will instantly kill all players in the circles. The easiest way to counter this mechanic is to stack up everyone except the main tank when the 2 binds are coming out. This allows for a few things. 1. If two players get small circles, they are already standing in their own circles because they are bound, and they are technically standing in each other's circles. Yes, even if you are bound in a circle, if you are in someone else's circle, you do count for it. So everybody just needs to get out if you get two small circles. 2. If one player gets a large circle and one gets a small circle, one additional player needs to make sure they are in a large circle without being in the small one. And 3, if two large circles spawn, one additional player can stand anywhere inside of them. Keep in mind that the move does not finish until the second missile hits, so players must remain in the proper position until the second ballistic missile strikes, or risk instantly killing players. As for the order of the tower spawns in this phase, it will begin with another Dreadnought plus defensive maneuvers tower set, which we handle the same way. Then another landmine plus defensive maneuver tower, which again, we handle the same way. And then finally a landmine plus dreadnought tower combination. This is where the trade-offs get a little bit risky. Do you want to get landmines at the same time as ballistic missile and risk people being running all over the place while getting bound? Or do you fancy having to burn down a dreadnought while dealing with the ballistic missile? We chose to place two players in the Dreadnought Tower and deal with the landmines. If your DPS is good enough, you can actually skip the last set of ballistic missiles if you get the boss down to 35%, which we did in this video, greatly reducing all of the risk. If you do not have the DPS to do this, I highly recommend pushing the landmine tower first and dealing with the bind during the Dreadnought spawn. It's much easier to maintain position this way. About this time should mark the end of Phase 2. Phase 3 will begin at either 7 minutes into the fight or 35% of the boss's HP, whichever comes first. He will no longer use Ballistic Missile or Brainjack, but he will get a new move, Allegan Field. The boss will place this on a target for 30 seconds. In that time, any damage that the player takes while under the effect will gather up, double, and explode for raid-wide AoE damage at the end of the duration. So, for example, if you took 2,000 damage while affected by Allegan Field, when it expires you will do a 4,000 damage raid-wide AoE to everyone. In order to counter this, keep Stoneskin and Eloquium up at all times on the target with Allegan Field. After it explodes, the avatar will wait 5 seconds before picking a new target for Allegan Field. Additionally, instead of 2 towers lighting up, 3 bio towers will become active instead. This means you will need to send 2 players to push one tower, 1 to another tower, and leave the last tower alone. Additionally, one of these towers is always the West Defensive Maneuver Tower, and the South Defensive Maneuver Tower can now be up too. With Allegan Field out, it is all about timing Allegan Field in such a way that you can try and avoid it lining up with the Defensive Maneuver Towers. With the timing we use, one of the Allegan Fields will be hit by a single defensive maneuver, but with Stoneskin, Eloquium, Sacred Soil, and Storm's Path on the boss, it should only do a few hundred damage, and when it expires, explode for about 1,500 damage, which is very, very manageable. The order of the towers in this phase are as follows. The West and South Defensive Maneuver Towers plus the landmines will be the first set. We send 2 people to the landmine tower and have our main tank grab the South Defensive Maneuver Tower. Remember, languishing only increases damage taken from pushing the tower again. It doesn't affect normal damage taken. The West Defensive Maneuver Tower should go off and hit someone with Allegan Field, so just take the necessary precautions. One additional thing to mention, these towers seem to take slightly longer to charge up than they did when they were double towers. Just saying, expect slight delays, the timing may not be exactly the same. The second set of towers is the West Defensive Maneuver Tower, plus landmines, plus the Dreadnought Tower. We pushed the Dreadnought Tower just to kill it quickly and placed our extra DPS in the Landmine Tower. Deal with the Dreadnought and the Landmine Towers as you have been before. If someone who has Allegan Field is supposed to be covering a quadrant, I highly recommend having a contingency plan for them. Same goes for if they have it and are supposed to be pushing a tower. And the Defensive Maneuver Tower should, again, go off at the same time as Allegan Field does. So, assuming the field target took no damage, the shield should go off a split second before the maneuver does. The final set of 3 towers is a repeat of the first set, 2 defensive towers plus landmines. At this point, you likely have less than a minute to win, so send the players to their needed towers, deal with any towers that actually happen to spawn, and finish the boss. Congratulations on your turn 8 win. Hopefully it was as fun for you as it was for us. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share for more information on Final Fantasy XIV. Be sure to check out the rest of the guides on my channel to check if there's anything there that could help you. Also, be sure to like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter if you have questions, or if you just want to pick my brain about something real quick. And finally, follow me on Twitch, where I do occasionally live stream. Final Fantasy XIV is the game that I live stream mostly, but throughout the year, I like to stream other things such as single-player Final Fantasy games and other games that I have a high degree of interest in. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.